Tim Brando, the legend himself, joining us now. And Tim, it's great to see you. I have been excited to have you on, and it's been a busy, hectic time, but hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. And it was great to hear you the other night. Love when you're on these Big 12 games, and just thanks for being on, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt. Great to be with you.
All right, was that the Sunday coaching carousel? I thought it almost upstaged the NFL games. You know, I cover the Cowboys, and I have for a lot of years. The Cowboys were off Sunday, but I have never had a Sunday where I just kind of spent the whole day monitoring all this craziness, Twitter, everything. You've seen some crazy stories over the years, and I think eventually here I'd like to ask you for the wildest coaching carousel story you can remember. But where did this one rank among the last decade or so?
Oh, it's number one. I mean, it's absolutely nothing compares to this, and nothing has had the impact of Lane Kiffin, because we've never had a college football postseason hanging in the lurch with regard to a coach, an entire team. What are they going to do? And it's the storyline hasn't really played out yet. I mean, the committee still can do whatever it wants in terms of screwing over Ole Miss because Lane Kiffin left. I mean, that's yet to be seen. We'll maybe get an indicator of that later tonight. In that god awful Tuesday show that they have to have, in October, that we don't even need to see until next Sunday. But this is a setup day. This is the day where the committee pretty much gives you an idea of who they're setting up to get in and who they're setting up to get knocked out. And as usual, they're going to be setting up the teams that have the big brands, and they're setting up those that don't to get knocked out. Texas, by example, automatically in now. Automatically in, no matter what. Forget the loss to 4-8 Florida. They're in. They just beat A&M, number 3 team in the country, and they've got Arch Manning. They were the preseason number 1, and they're Texas. They get in. Screw the fact that Vanderbilt's playing better football right now, has a better record than they do right now, and arguably, they didn't have Ohio State on their schedule, and Texas did, but Clark Lee's team is playing at a higher level, and just ask Tennessee, they'll tell you they were thoroughly whipped in Knoxville by Vanderbilt, and but they'll use head to head when it matters. They'll use head to head. They'll use head to head for Notre Dame because they can, and then they'll use something else to make sure that Miami gets in or doesn't get in, based on whatever excuse they want to make up to say that Miami can get in too. And the Big 12 might as well forget about it, regardless of how good Utah, BYU, and Texas Tech all are. The Texas Tech BYU Big 12 championship is going to knock one of the teams out. It's a play-in game. Even Texas Tech, if they were to lose, I think is in peril. They may not get in were they to lose that game, just as BYU would have to win. I don't know that they'll ever take 2 teams out of the Big 12 when they're trying to sandwich in as many as 6 SEC teams. And that's exactly what they're doing. They are trying to get a half dozen SEC teams in, minimum of 5. Of 5. All the other teams, and particularly if you're in the Mountain Time Zone, you're screwed. You're absolutely screwed.
It almost makes you think the Big 12 and ACC should take that deal where they get 2 automatic teams.
Absolutely, they should. Absolutely, they should. Tony Petitti is not a popular guy with the college football media community because he doesn't do interviews as readily as Greg Sankey does interviews. And to some extent, I get that. And full disclosure, I worked for him for 9 of my 18 years at CBS. He's a smart guy. His idea about having play-in games and earning your bids through the play-in games is a really good one. Okay. I think that bids should be earned, not given. And the closer we get to that, the better. Now, look, the 24 team idea, which he had at the beginning of the season, was like throwing something on a wall that didn't stick. And it is ahead of its time. It's not time for that yet. But I do think the more compelling games that you can put together to determine which four teams out of the Big Ten go, which four teams out of the um, the SEC goes, and then the two each for the Big 12 and the ACC. That's a great deal for those leagues. I've said that all along. And otherwise, you're just going to have the SEC Invitational every year because it's what makes the best TV. And the committee has gotten its marching orders from its rights holder. If all the networks were involved in the postseason as they are in the NFL, if everyone had a stake in this, you wouldn't see the monopoly and the corruption that we're seeing with regard to the teams that get in and those that are left out. Time after time, this is what happens. The committee's not corrupt, but the process is corrupt. That's what's corrupt. And the format structure enables that. The three worst words, Matt, in college football and in sports this time of year: all-state playoff predictor. How would you like to be Clark Lee and your team just disposed of Tennessee, blew them out in Knoxville, and you're riding down the highway in your bus to the airport to get back to Nashville from Knoxville, and you've got your TVs on, and you see Reese Davis come on with a graphic that says, all-state playoff predictor, Vanderbilt's chances of getting in the playoffs are 10%. Texas is 47%. How would you like to see that? I mean, so Vanderbilt, unfortunately, even though they are in the preferred league of ESPN, the SEC, they are not a brand team. They lack brand, and this is all about brand bias. It starts with brand bias, and then it's about conference bias, and there's no question that the SEC gets the nod every year with that. Every year. And by the way, I have great respect for the conference, top to bottom. The most balanced league in America, in my view, is the Big 12. But the SEC this year had greater balance without an elite team. They don't have one team in their league that's as good, in my opinion, as either Indiana or Ohio State. But they do have a bevy of really, 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 really good teams. And they probably deserve to get 4 minimum and 5 possibly. But to try to sandwich in 6 and then guarantee us that we're going to have 5, that's a bit much. That is a bit much. But whatever they can get away with is what they're going to do.
And this goes back to even early in the committee days, 2014. They were setting Ohio State up, big brand, when Baylor and TCU were fighting it out, always knowing that Baylor and TCU didn't really have a chance. They tried to make it appear that they did, but the fix was in.
It was a setup.
Yeah.
TCU fell from third to sixth, and Ohio State went from 8 to 4 that year. So it's brand bias first, okay, and that's the reason why Ohio State is higher ranked than Indiana right now. Indiana, on paper and by measure, just looking at how they've played, deserves to be number 1 over Ohio State. They do, but they're not. Why? Brand. It's all about the brand.
Yeah, and it's why BYU can't overcome if they lose this game. It's Tech still. Tech has crashed the party, and the committee doesn't know what to do with them.
Yeah. That's enough. We only have one party crasher. We can't have 2.
No.
Yeah, and that's the way they view them. That's the way they view the Big 12 in this process and with this format structure. Yormark is going to be really pissed off, and he's got a right to be. But imagine that's a really competitive game. I think BYU will play as great a game as possible. I do think that it's still going to be largely a Texas Tech crowd at Jerry World. But are you going to tell me that Bachmeier and those guys didn't learn something. There's always an advantage in a rematch to the team that
Yeah.
lost the first game. I think it'll be a great game. I really do. But no matter what happens, I still see the loser is screwed. I just don't think they'll take two teams. And for BYU, uh, the case that they want to make is that, yeah, we lost, but we lost at their place. Now we play a great game. Let's say you lose on a field goal at the end. Shouldn't they go? Yeah, but they're not in the right league. And the argument would be it's the Mountain Time Zone. And really, who do they play? The metrics here, they set this thing up with the understanding that the metrics would always favor the Southeastern Conference. And they do. Even the Big Ten with their two elite teams. And I think both those teams, Ohio State and Indiana, are the cream of the top of college football this year. But what happened with the back half of the season is schools like Michigan, Nebraska, USC all had chances to be maybe the third or fourth team to step up. Now, I do think Oregon clearly is one of the three that's definitely in. But all those other teams, Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan, Nebraska, USC, were all teams that had the brands that had they gotten hot the last 4 weeks could have made a case to be a fourth Big Ten team. None of them did. So that opens up another spot for the SEC. See where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
And so that plus in the Big 12 wasn't the narrative earlier in the year. Think about it. Even during the course of the season, the narrative was, oh, it's Texas Tech and everybody else. In other words, nobody else is really that good. Texas Tech is great. We'll accept them, but nobody else is really that good. And the Arizona State loss looks like an aberration. That Arizona State really didn't get much love for the win. And then, of course, when they lost Tyson and they lost Levitt, they lost their credibility as a potential team to get in. Had Arizona State not lost Levitt and Tyson, and they had gotten on a run and had two losses, they might have had an even better case than BYU. But unfortunately for Kenny Dillingham, that wasn't the case. And those two guys were vital for ASU. They were vital.
It's interesting that Dillingham, I don't know if they came after him or they just took care of him. And I know he's an Arizona State guy, but to me, he was a tremendous candidate. And it's interesting that they went with all those American Athletic Conference. And who knows, a couple of those guys may be great. But Dillingham and what he's done at Arizona State is honestly one of the great coaching stories. It's not quite Indiana, but what he's done at Arizona State after that mess that Herm and Ray and all that mess that happened there. That's one of the great stories in college football.
It is. And, I give Kenny a lot of credit. And this is where, I do give him a lot of credit because his phone was ringing off the hook. And I know that he basically told his representative, I'm not taking any calls. I'm not. He did the same thing, Lanning. He worked for Lanning. And when Lanning got to Oregon, he made no bones about it. He told Jimmy Sexton, don't put my name in there. I'm not interested. And I'm not sure, but I think Kenny probably has Jimmy too. Bottom line is that president at Arizona State better pony up and give him whatever he needs and whatever he wants, because historically that's what Arizona State's had as its biggest problem. That is a sleeping giant, has been for some time. That crowd is awesome. The location is fantastic. The school is a great school. Plus, it's a party school. Tempe is just awesome. And they sold out every game this year. And Kenny knows he's got momentum gathered. And he's a Chaparral High kid. That's his dream job. He's made that his destination. He didn't have to, but he did. Because I guarantee you, if Kiffin had balked at LSU, they would have gone his way. If Auburn thought or Florida thought Kenny Dillingham was gettable, they would have gone that way too. I think Summerall is a great coach. And I think that there was a little game of chicken going on with Auburn in Florida about his services. And ultimately, Scott Strickland in Florida won the sweepstakes. Summerall will get the job done. in my view. He's a really, really good coach, and a little like Dillingham has been successful, everywhere he's been.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at those careers and go, okay, which guy? Because Fritz had already done some good things, as you know, at Tulane. So Sumrall continued to build on that. I always
Right.
look for the coach like Golish. The thing you'd have to say about him is he went to a place that was kind of in shatters and not much, and
Right.
he got them going. So that certainly speaks to him. Do you? I would imagine you and Jimmy Sexton have crossed paths over the years. I mean,
We
he would
have.
appear to be the most powerful man in all of college football because obviously he has so many of these coaches and he can negotiate all these things. And by the way, Lane Kiffin, certainly, as he said, he's not even looked at the numbers, right? He does not
Yeah.
know how much is in his contract. What's up? I've only been on the phone with Jimmy once, and it was because he was trying to represent Art Briles, and sadly, I think Jimmy found out there was one guy at that time that even Jimmy Sexton couldn't get a job, right? And so and that was Art. But what that has got to be fascinating. So again, what is he like? And is that kind of a scary thing for college football that he just kind of seems to control all of that? Since he has kind of the market cornered on all, 80% of the most talented coaches in the country.
I first met Jimmy when I met Nick Saban, and he was getting the LSU job from Michigan State, and I had a talk show at that time. I did for 15 years, and I retired it about 10 years ago. And I was asking him about Nick because so many people I knew Nick from covering uh, the game nationally. I was at CBS at the time, but I was doing my radio show then for Sporting News Radio. They were in the radio business back then, and he told me that Nick had done the homework on number of players per capita in a state, and that if you looked at Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, and California, those were all talent-rich states for football. But if you looked at each state per capita, there was one state that stood out in terms of a low population base that was producing NFL talent into the college game, and that was Louisiana. And so Nick felt like he could come there, build a fence around the state, and he could immediately turn the thing around. And he did. He got there in 2000. 2001, they surprise Tennessee in the SEC championship, win the conference championship, go on to the Sugar Bowl, blow out Illinois. And then 2 years later, he's winning a national championship at that same bowl game, the BCS title, beating Oklahoma. That's how I met Jimmy. Um, and in agency circles, he's got a lot of rivals, and those rivals have said in recent years some pretty disparaging things. But that's how that business works. It
Yeah.
it it gets nasty. I mean, it does. I had great respect for the fact that the guy was on top of his game and really uh, was able to sell coaches, that many of them that do the same thing. I'm in the performance business too, and we only have about a handful of agencies in sports broadcasting that handle a lot of clients. And I was one of those guys in the beginning that always felt like, hey, if you got like 8 versions of me and you're throwing me up on a wall for jobs with 7 other guys, I really need somebody that's a little bit more in tune with what I want, not what he thinks all of us want. As I've gotten older, I've realized that the people that represent a lot of guys that do what you do have a better relationship with the people that are making the hire at the networks. And so that's really what, in essence, Sexton has done at CAA, which also has a broadcasting arm, as you know. Um, so I think we all have to be in touch and in tune with that. But what's really happened here is Jimmy Sexton has exposed the level of mismanagement and the level of institutional lack of control by the institutions, that they have lawyers, yes, but they are lawyers that get beaten in court. They are lawyers that didn't finish tops in their class. It's like a great defense attorney against a prosecutorial group that's not being paid what that great defense attorney was being paid. He's like the dream team, and they're like the guys that were prosecuting in the OJ case. They get beat every time. They get beat every time, and that kind of power and control has become a bit scary. Now, he doesn't have 14 of the 16 guys that he once had in the SEC, but just a little over 18 months ago, he had 14 of the 16 coaches in the Southeastern Conference. His number's gone down some recently, though, with some firings like the Billy Napier firing and a few others. But I have respect for what he's done. But at the same time, for college football, the problems and the lost money, when you think about all of the wasted revenue, like, for instance, LSU finally now, is, if you notice, their lawyers have decided to straighten up and fly right. They're going to pay Brian Kelly all $54 million. They're not going to fire him for cause. They're firing him because he didn't get it done on the field, which we all knew that was just garbage that they were trying to pull off for a period of weeks, playing a game of chicken. The game of chicken is over because they found a $200 million package to hire Lane. When you add up the assistant coaches, Lane's deal, plus the players in the NIL, it's a $200 million deal. So clearly they had to find the extra $30 million to pay all 54 to Brian. But when you look at all of that lost revenue, LSU is, I think this month, December, is Ed Orgeron's last paycheck. Ed Orgeron gets his last paycheck this month. So they are paying, at least up until the end of December, 3 coaches, Kelly, Orgeron, and now the new $91 million 7-year deal for Lane Kiffin. What does that tell you? That tells you that LSU has been, a disaster in terms of governance. They have been awful. It's a cluster blank. Okay.
Yeah.
When you look at how they've mismanaged from an administrative standpoint, the finances of their football program. It's that simple. And I'm from Louisiana. All right. It's embarrassing, but it's true. Okay. Is it a great job? Sure it is. Do they have a lot of pride? Is it different, like Lane said yesterday? Yeah, it is. But politics and football have always been intertwined here. And I'll say this, Lane, you better be as successful as you were at Ole Miss, and you better not have a 4-loss season or a 5-loss season. He had a 5-loss season the year he flirted with Auburn, you might recall. They were 8-1 and finished 8-5 that year, and no one at Ole Miss said boo. He came back and he had multiple winning seasons the next 3 years. Okay, if he loses 3 games in Baton Rouge, they'll be hell to pay. They may hang on for 2, 3, or 4 years of that, but he could have done all that he wanted at Ole Miss. Could have had his own statue built while he was still in his 50s. He chose to go to LSU instead. That was the bigger get for him. I get it. It's a bigger program with a prouder tradition of championships, but they will not be as patient there as they were at Ole Miss. Not by a long shot.
Well, listen, I love having you, and I want to be respectful of your time because I could do this all day. Last thing I had for you, Tim, Dave Aranda. I've got a lot of Baylor audience.
Right.
He beats Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss in 2021 Sugar Bowl, as you well recall. Bears are sitting up there. I think they finished that year like 5th in the country, 5th or 6th in the country. They're thinking, oh, man, the good times are here. NIL portal hits. Aranda was not good at that, as we could have predicted. Very quiet, introverted, does not like doing media, all the things. He now gets to keep his job, not based on success, but based on a weird circumstance with the AD, and they don't have an AD to fire him. Now, at Georgia, at LSU, they don't need an AD to fire you, right? There's always somebody to fire you.
That was clear.
But at Baylor, apparently, the president doesn't want to do it, and they would like to have an AD in place. Are you surprised that it's been so difficult for Dave Aranda? And what do you think of that situation? because right now it's looking again like a lame duck situation. Bring in a new AD and then see what AD will now have a next season to evaluate things.
Well, honestly, I told a number of people, and again, full disclosure, Mike Rhodes is a guy I have a good relationship with, and my last visit there was was during the Arizona State game, which they had a chance to win, played great in really, but lost on a walk-off field goal at the end of the game. But I said this to people at Baylor last year when they were in the middle of a skid. I said, listen, they're not far away from winning some games here. That was right as they were making the move to Sawyer Robertson as quarterback.
Yeah.
And they got on a run. Back half of the season, they beat a lot of people, and they had a respectable record and wound up a bowl team. This season asked the same question, but the question came after the firing at Penn State, after the firing at Arkansas, after the firing of BK at LSU, and the question was, do you cut ties now or do you wait? And I said, you wait. You absolutely wait. And I thought you waited even if Rhodes had kept his job, because in this cycle, in this carousel cycle, the coaches that your fan base thinks that they would really like to get, they're not going to be available. They're gone. They're going to what are perceived as better jobs than Baylor. Okay, so you needed to wait. Does he have a chance? I think to restore his presence and Baylor's in the Big 12. I think so. I think that one of the great things about the Big 12 is the balance is so great that the difference between 4-8 and 8-4, or 2-9 and 2-10 and 8-2, or 10-2 is not that great. You're playing a lot of close games. My view is Dave needs an offensive mind that everyone can just rally around. Spavital's a good coach. Don't get me wrong. Jake's a good coach. Been around, knows the area really well. But I think that they need more presence from their assistant coaches that Dave can settle around. He's a really good coach, really good defensive coach. Came into that job as one of the, I think maybe the best defensive coordinator in the college game at that particular point, after Les Miles won the national, Ed Orgeron won the national championship in 2019. His personality is a bit aloof to some, but I think his dignity, his approach with his players is really good. I think they all want to play hard and play well for him. But the reality here is Baylor's got to take a look at itself and its national image, okay? And I think the biggest problem they have is not around the country. It's in that area, in the Waco and surrounding area. And you can help me with this, Matt. You can help me with this a little bit. I think that even after the 21 championship, which I got to see firsthand, called a couple of teams' games. In fact, their last loss before they went on that run to the Sugar Bowl was the one to TCU, which they could have been playing in the playoff. If they had not lost that game to Chandler Morris and TCU that year, Baylor might have qualified for the CFP that year. They lost that game, came back home, and then won a key game, and then beat, of course, Oklahoma State when they were on a run. So my view is this: if they can finally get the residue of the Briles circumstances out of that community, I know it's a strong faith-based community, all right? I think the combination of that and the student body, for whatever reason, has not embraced the program the way it should, the way it would at most places. Maybe that's because of that residue. I mean, what happened there was beyond the pale. It was awful. And it was a stain that stayed with the program a long time. Kept, I think, a good man and a good coach, Briles, out of coaching altogether until he just got this D2 job, right? I think it's a D2 job.
Correct.
He just got. for a long, long time. Very unfortunate. But I think it also was something that the school couldn't get rid of and the student body couldn't get rid of. And that very strong Baptist community that is Waco, Texas, has been slow to come around. I was amazed that for that Arizona State game that they didn't have a bigger crowd. It was a primetime game, it was on national television. They had played Auburn really well in the opener and lost, but they played well. They performed well in that game, I felt. Um, they didn't get any momentum or juice from that game. They need a game early in the season against a quality team at home that they can win, that they can gather some juice from and build some momentum again with that fan base. I thought
Yeah.
the personnel's not bad. I didn't think their personnel was terribly weak. In fact, I thought it was highly competitive. But I know what made it look bad for Aranda this year was that their offense was actually much better than his defense. And that was his calling card when he came in. And when you lose that edge, and that was his modus operandi coming in, was he was a great defensive coach. When you lose that moniker by having teams put 45 and 50 points up, then that hurts your credibility some. I'm a guy, I'll be honest, I'm rooting for Dave. I hope he can have a good offseason, do well in the portal and signing day, because I do think he's a good coach and would be worthy of another year, if nothing else, because the carousel was such that the marketplace had closed Baylor out to really a minimal position in terms of the type of people they could attract. If you can attract somebody that's really going to be great and really satisfy that fan base, I'm all in. But
Yeah.
at this point, I don't think you can get anybody better than Dave right now. I just don't.
Given the circumstances, yeah,
Right.
and given the
Right.
fact you're talking about the stench of a scandal 10 years ago, Baylor unfortunately has too many of them, and this Mac
Yeah.
thing is the
Yeah.
latest
Oh, yeah.
weirdness. Now, hopefully, that won't
Yeah.
have as lasting of an impact, and they can
Right.
turn things around. All right, well, I think that's the reason I like you so much. It's confirmed that behind you, you have that old Pirates cap, and I'm a huge. I fell in love at the age of 6 with the We Are Family team,
Yeah.
and
Hey,
yeah.
I got to tell you, that Scrap Iron gave me that. Phil Garner
Oh
gave me
my
that hat.
gosh.
He gave me that hat. It's got his name on the bill inside the bill of the
Wow.
cap, and he gave it to me when he was the Astros manager. Ernie Johnson Sr. and I were doing Braves games in the mid '90s on Sports South, the regional cable that at the time Ted Turner owned and later became Fox South when Fox bought up all those regionals back in the day. But Phil used to come on my radio show all the time. And I told him that my high school baseball team at Fair Park in Shreveport had the same uniforms as the Pittsburgh Pirates. And he was like, really? And I said, yeah. And I even showed him a picture of me playing first base and what looked exactly like the Bob Robertson, Willie Stargell, Richie Hebner Pittsburgh Pirates of '71 when I was playing high school baseball in '72, 3 and 4 at Fair Park in Shreveport. And I showed him the picture. He was like, I got something you might like. And he went in and gave it to me. How cool is that? How cool is that?
That's unbelievable. Yeah,
Yeah.
like Cobra and Pops and the whole gang, man. That's
Yeah.
that's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
listen, have a great week because this is an interesting time for you because we got football still rolling and then basketball. You jump right in and there's a ton of stuff that Fox has and
Yeah.
I don't know which part of. I'm sure the streaming people are after you now, so there's there's no shortage of games out there.
Yeah.
Tim, I appreciate it. Always love having you. Next time I have you on, I do want to ask you about the first time you ever said, "How do you do?" I have had that thought cross
Yeah.
my mind over the years. So let's tease that for next time.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you doing this. It's great
Yeah.
to visit with you.
Thank you, Matt. I'll be on this Saturday at noon. We'll start off college football's championship Saturday with a hell of a hoops game. Number 4, uh, Duke at Michigan State at Breslin. Jimmy Jackson and
Wow.
I'll have it at noon Eastern, 11 Central Time. So I'm trading in my football for the round ball, and that's one of the great things about my frustration at the end of every college football season, because so much of the postseason I can't stand, is that basketball starts right away, and I jump right in with a game like that, knowing full well at the end we have an NCAA tournament And that's the only thing the NCAA gets right is the NCAA men's basketball tournament at the end.
Yeah, I hope Jim doesn't get booed out of there. You know that that fandom may remember some of Jim's college days. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon. You bet. There he goes, Tim Brando.